My stepmom called me a fraud in front of 200 veterans. The words rang in my ears, louder than any cannon fire I had ever heard at sea. I froze, my chest tightening, as if the room itself had swallowed me whole. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. I'm Captain Sarah Bennett, 32, a Navy officer, decorated, trained, and disciplined. But right now, in that moment, I felt like a child again, crushed under the weight of someone who refused to see my accomplishments. The ceremony was for my father, Colonel Richard Bennett, 62, a decorated military man in his own right. Hundreds of veterans filled the hall, proud and reverent. They came to honor him, his service, his legacy. And there I was, standing in the shadow of all that respect, while my stepmom, Margaret, 50, smirked like she had some secret power over me. Her words weren't just cruel, they were meant to erase me. I felt the sting of every sacrifice, every sleepless night on deployment, every grueling exercise that had pushed me to the edge. The medals on my chest, the uniform I wore with pride, all of it suddenly felt invisible under her accusation. My father glanced at me with a small, tight-lipped frown, and I knew he felt caught between pride for my achievements and the shock of Margaret's public insult. The veterans murmured, glances flickering between us, sensing tension but unsure of the story. And then, through the haze of humiliation, I caught a movement at the far side of the stage. Admiral Matthews, 58, distinguished, commanding, one of the highest-ranking officers I had ever served under, was looking straight at me. His eyes held a weight of authority and recognition, and for a moment, everything else, the insult, the silence, the disbelief, faded. My heart skipped. Could this be the moment that changed everything? Could the truth finally be undeniable, in front of everyone, including her? I straightened my shoulders, gripped my uniform, and stepped forward, trying to steady the storm of emotions raging inside me. Then, the unimaginable happened. Admiral Matthews raised his hand, sharply, crisply, and saluted me. My chest rose with a sudden, sharp intake of breath as the word fell into place. Rear Admiral. The room went still. Margaret's face drained of color. Veterans froze mid-cheer. And I realized, in that instant, that the truth was about to be seen by everyone. The applause and chatter of the ceremony faded into background noise as I stepped forward. Every eye in the room seemed to land on me, magnifying Margaret's words like a spotlight on my shame. "Fraud," she had said. The word bounced in my mind over and over. Fraud. As if all the years I'd poured into the Navy, the deployments, the leadership roles, the medals earned in blood, sweat, and sacrifice, were nothing. I forced myself to breathe, to keep my head high. My uniform was perfect, medals shining under the hall lights, and yet I felt vulnerable in a way no storm at sea had ever made me. I could hear the quiet whispers of the veterans, their curiosity piqued. Most of them didn't know me personally, but many had served with my father. And here I was, caught between my stepmom's cruelty and the unspoken expectations of a room full of men and women who valued honor above all else. I remembered the first time Margaret had undermined me, years ago, when I first told my father I wanted to join the Navy. She had scoffed, saying, "You'll never survive in that world. You're not cut out for it." I had ignored her words then, and I had ignored them now, but the sting remained. For months, I had wondered if my father saw me the way she did, as someone pretending, someone undeserving of respect. Glancing at him now, I saw a flicker of concern, but also pride. He had always supported me in private, even if Margaret tried to overshadow that support in public. And then I noticed Admiral Matthews at the far side of the stage, standing tall, eyes fixed on me. Recognition, respect, and a subtle nod of acknowledgement passed between us. Suddenly, the tension shifted. It wasn't just about Margaret's words anymore. It was about proving that truth and achievement could not be erased by jealousy or malice. I straightened, squared my shoulders, and felt the weight of all my accomplishments anchor me in that moment. And then it happened. Admiral Matthews lifted his hand in a crisp salute, and I realized the word that followed would shatter the narrative Margaret had tried to impose. What will he say? Will the room finally recognize my authority and my truth? And how will Margaret react when everything she tried to deny is revealed? The room was silent, but I could feel it humming with anticipation. Every veteran, every officer, every guest was waiting for what would come next. Margaret's lips parted, her expression frozen in disbelief. I could almost hear her thoughts. How could she? Who does she think she is? And that's when Admiral Matthews stepped forward, his uniform immaculate, his posture commanding. He looked directly at me again, his eyes sharp and unwavering. My heart thumped, but this time it was pride, not fear. This was the moment I had trained for, the moment I had earned. Every deployment, every sleepless night, every challenge I had conquered, it all led here. Margaret tried to interrupt, stammering, "Sarah, wait!" But the room was no longer hers to control. The veterans, the crowd, they were watching, and I could feel their respect radiating toward me. Admiral Matthews didn't hesitate. He raised his hand in the crispest salute I had ever seen and spoke clearly, loudly, so everyone could hear. "Rear Admiral Sarah Bennett." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Gasps rippled through the room. The veterans snapped to attention, some clapping, some saluting, all acknowledging the authority that Margaret had tried to deny. My father's eyes glistened with pride, his chest swelling with unspoken relief. I felt a sudden wave of vindication, but also disbelief. This was real. Margaret's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The years of jealousy and bitterness collided with the undeniable reality of my achievements. The crowd's attention, the salute, the title, it was all evidence she could not dispute. I straightened further, letting the moment settle. I felt the eyes of every person in the room on me, acknowledging my rank, my service, my worth. Margaret's attempt to humiliate me had utterly backfired. The silence she had hoped for turned into a spotlight on her disbelief. And then I realized, this was only the beginning. The full weight of the consequences for Margaret, for our family, for my father's ceremony was about to unfold. How will she react now? What will the veterans think of her audacity? And how far will the truth ripple through this room? The room felt like it had frozen in time. Margaret's face was a mask of shock, her jaw slightly open, her words caught somewhere between disbelief and panic. She had tried to control the narrative, to cast me as a pretender, a fraud in front of 200 veterans. But the reality of my achievements could not be denied. The uniform, the medals, the title, everything screamed truth. I could feel every pair of eyes in the hall turning toward me. Veterans whispered, some glanced at one another in astonishment, others straightened in recognition of my rank. My father's chest rose with pride, his eyes misted as he watched me stand tall, calm, and unshakable. It was a moment that belonged to me, but it also belonged to all the sacrifices that had led here. Admiral Matthews, commanding and precise, held his salute for a long, deliberate beat. Then he lowered his hand, nodding with a subtle smile of approval. He spoke again, loud enough that everyone could hear. "Rear Admiral Bennett, your service, leadership, and dedication are recognized and honored." The veterans erupted, standing and applauding, some saluting in deference to the rank I had earned. Margaret's disbelief intensified. She tried to speak, to interject, but her voice faltered and was drowned out by the roaring acknowledgement of my authority. Every gesture, every medal, every year of service I had endured was now public, undeniable evidence of my worth. I felt a rush of emotions, relief, validation, pride, but also a quiet joy in seeing her facade crumble. Her attempt to humiliate me had been exposed for what it was: bitterness and jealousy, powerless against truth. Veterans clapped, some saluted again, and my father's proud gaze never left me. Margaret sank into her chair, mouth open, flustered, trying to comprehend the scene unraveling in front of her. I realized then that the room wasn't just witnessing my rank, it was witnessing her defeat, my vindication, and the undeniable truth of who I was. Could anyone deny it now? How would the family and veterans process this? And what does this moment mean for my father, my stepmom, and me? Admiral Matthews' salute and declaration had done what no words from Margaret could. They confirmed the truth. I was not a fraud. I was Rear Admiral Sarah Bennett, recognized for my service, my leadership, and my dedication. The veterans, the military colleagues, and the audience of 200 eyes now witnessed the undeniable reality of my achievements. Margaret's public attack had been completely invalidated in a single commanding moment. My father, Colonel Richard Bennett, looked at me with pride shining through his eyes, a rare smile breaking his stoic demeanor. He had always believed in me, even when Margaret had tried to convince him otherwise. In front of this crowd, he now openly acknowledged my accomplishments, and it felt like a weight had lifted from both our shoulders. I felt a rush of relief and validation wash over me. Years of sacrifices, deployments that kept me away from family holidays, the endless drills, the sleepless nights on duty, had led to this moment. My stepmom's attempt to shame me had failed spectacularly. I could feel my confidence restored, not just in my rank, but in my worth as a person, a professional, and a daughter who had earned respect on her own merits. The veterans' applause and salutes reinforced what I had known all along. Truth cannot be erased, and integrity earns recognition, even against those who try to belittle you. Margaret's mouth stayed open, flustered, a visual echo of defeat. The room's attention had shifted entirely. She was no longer the one in control, and I had stepped into my rightful place. The aftermath was immediate and undeniable. Margaret's credibility was damaged. She had publicly misjudged me, and everyone saw it. My father, relieved and proud, finally spoke freely about my career, strengthening our bond. The veterans, colleagues, and family members now treated me with the authority my rank deserved. Even socially, Margaret's attempts to undermine me were rendered powerless. The truth had triumphed publicly and irreversibly. I adjusted my uniform, straightened my medals, and stood tall. The ceremony continued, but for me, this moment marked the culmination of years of struggle and dedication. I had been called a fraud, humiliated, and doubted, but now I had walked into truth, walked out validated, and walked forward with the undeniable honor of Rear Admiral Sarah Bennett. I looked at my father one last time, his eyes glistening with pride, and felt a profound sense of closure. The truth had been witnessed. Justice had been served, not through anger, but through recognition, dignity, and undeniable achievement. For the first time in years, I felt completely unshakable.